I don't know what 95 feels like, except every time I hear the number 95, I go, who's 95 here? I don't know what it is. I lead a healthy life. I essentially don't drink, I don't smoke.
95 years old. Most people that age are somewhere quiet. Maybe a garden, maybe a porch, counting blessings and steering clear of drama.
Great artists who, in theater and in film, are just extraordinary human beings. I don't know about their personal lives and what their thinking is like, but what they've created.
But William Shatner, he has never done quiet a day in his life. The man who made Captain Kirk a household name is still talking, still working, and finally telling the truth about what really went down on the most legendary sci-fi set in television history. Cold shoulders, sabotaged scenes, a feud so venomous it outlasted the show by 5 decades. A friendship that dissolved into heartbreaking silence. A wife he couldn't save. Tonight, we're beaming straight into the chaos. Welcome aboard. This ride has no warp speed limit. The icon, the legend, the man who never watched his own show. Let's start with the obvious. William Shatner is one of the most recognizable names in entertainment. Literally. The man. The myth. Captain James Tiberius Kirk. The guy who turned a low-budget 1960s sci-fi show about space travel into a cultural religion that billions of people still worship today. Star Trek, the original series, ran from 1966 to 1969, and Shatner appeared in every single episode. Not most of them. Every single one. He then went on to voice Kirk in the animated series, starred in the first 7 Star Trek films, and became so embedded in that uniform that, at one point, it was genuinely hard to tell where William Shatner ended and James T. Kirk began. But here's the thing, and this is where it starts getting interesting. The man who built a dynasty out of playing Captain Kirk has never actually sat down and watched the original show. Not most of it, anyway. Which somehow makes the whole legend even stranger. In a 2021 interview with People magazine, Shatner admitted that he has avoided watching himself on screen for most of his career because, and I quote, he doesn't like the way he looks or what he does. The discomfort of watching himself perform is so real, so painful, that even after 60 years, he can't bring himself to do it. The one Star Trek film he has seen? Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. And you know why? Because he directed it. He had no choice. Now, before you assume this means Shatner was a one-trick pony who peaked in the 60s and rode that wave forever, hold on. Because the man's post-Kirk resume is genuinely staggering. He played the alien boss, yes, the big giant head, on Third Rock from the Sun. He appeared in Miss Congeniality. He wrote a whole series of sci-fi novels called Tech War, which also became a TV series. But the real crown jewel, his role as the utterly unhinged, wildly entertaining Denny Crane in The Practice, and then its spin-off, Boston Legal. That role didn't just get him respect. It won him 2 Emmy Awards. 2, not nominations, wins. At an age when most Hollywood veterans are being graciously handed Lifetime Achievement trophies and shuffled off stage, Shatner was collecting actual hardware. So yes, the legacy is enormous. The talent is undeniable. But here's the thing about enormous legacies. They cast enormous shadows, and not everyone standing in that shadow was happy about it. Which begs the question, if William Shatner was so beloved by audiences, why did some of the people closest to him, the very co-stars he worked alongside every single day, spend decades saying he was an absolute nightmare? Set Secrets, the Star Trek cast that was anything but one big happy family. Let's be very clear about something. The world of Star Trek is built on an idea of unity, diversity. A crew of different backgrounds and species working together for the greater good of humanity. It's basically the most wholesome concept television ever produced. And yet, behind that message of togetherness, the on-set reality was reportedly something else entirely. Multiple cast members of the original series have gone on record in memoirs, interviews, and documentaries, describing a working environment shaped largely by one man's outsized ego. And that man was William Shatner. Nichelle Nichols, who played the iconic Lieutenant Uhura, was candid in interviews about her frustrations on set. She said Shatner had a habit of bossing around directors and even guest stars, and that he treated the show less like a team ensemble and more like his personal vehicle. And it showed in the work, because Shatner allegedly had a very particular habit of requesting rewrites that shifted key dialogue away from other characters and onto himself. He didn't just want the best lines. He wanted all the lines. Walter Koenig, who played Chekhov, admitted on a podcast years later that there was a time when he genuinely resented Shatner for his behavior on set. James Doohan, Scotty, beloved Scotty, had his own issues with Shatner for years, though he eventually softened and the two made peace before Doohan's death in 2005. And then, confirming what everyone had been whispering for years, came Gene Roddenberry himself. The creator of Star Trek, the man who built the entire universe, reportedly wrote a letter to both Shatner and Leonard Nimoy, telling them that between the two of them, they had, in his words, divided up the market on selfishness and egocentricity. Let that sink in. The father of the franchise had to write both his lead stars a letter telling them to stop acting like divas, on a show literally about cooperation and peace. In 1989, when Shatner was directing Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, things hit a new low. He made a deliberate decision to cut a scene in which Sulu, George Takei's character, takes command of the ship. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a budget issue. Takei believed it was pure, calculated sabotage, a move designed to keep the camera exactly where Shatner preferred it, on himself. Doohan, Nichols, Koenig, they all eventually moved on, more or less. Time heals most things. But there was one cast member for whom time changed absolutely nothing. So who was it that carried those wounds the longest and turned them into a 5-decade public feud that still makes headlines today? The answer, unsurprisingly, would only make the drama worse. The feud that refuses to die. Shatner versus George Takei. George Takei, Hikaru Sulu, helmsman of the USS Enterprise, has been telling anyone who would listen since the 1990s that William Shatner is, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the most difficult human beings he has ever worked with. And Shatner? He has spent the same amount of time insisting that Takei's grudge is baffling, irrational, and, as he once cheerfully suggested, possibly the product of mental illness. Welcome to the most dramatic feud in sci-fi history. Population: 2 men in their 90s, still at it. The origins, according to Takei, go all the way back to the 1960s on set. In his 1994 memoir, To the Stars, Takei wrote that Shatner would routinely ignore him between takes, not just on bad days, but as a pattern of behavior. The cold shoulder, the deliberate non-acknowledgement, the kind of petty social cruelty that actors who know exactly how much power they hold tend to exercise over those below them in the pecking order. That resentment simmered for decades. Then came 1989 and the Star Trek V scene cut, which poured accelerant all over it. But the moment that truly turned this into a pop culture spectacle, the moment that gave entertainment journalists everything they needed, came in 2008. In 2008, George Takei married his longtime partner Brad Altman in a joyful, widely covered ceremony. It was a milestone moment, not just personally, but historically. And Takei invited the entire original Star Trek cast. Except, he claims, the invitations never made it to Shatner. Or rather, and this is where the stories diverge spectacularly, Shatner claims he was the only cast member deliberately not invited. Shatner, never one to process things privately, uploaded a YouTube video about the situation in which he called the alleged snub a psychosis and suggested, with the kind of barely veiled viciousness that only the truly wounded can muster, that Takei had some serious psychological issues to work through. Takei responded that an invitation had absolutely been sent and that Shatner simply never responded. 2 stories. 1 feud, 0 resolution. Fans, of course, were left endlessly debating who was telling the truth. By 2015, Takei had officially stopped sugarcoating it. In an interview with the New York Times, he called Shatner an egocentric, self-involved prima donna. Not a dig, not shade. Full capital-letter accusation on the record in one of the most widely read newspapers on the planet. Shatner fired back, as he always does, saying the only time Takei ever got press was when he was trashing him. He also pointed out, with some exasperation, that all of this appeared to stem from a camera angle dispute that happened more than 50 years ago. A 30-second scene. Half a century of bitterness. Even after Shatner's triumphant 2021 Blue Origin spaceflight, a genuinely historic moment when he became the oldest person ever to reach space, Takei couldn't resist. He cracked publicly that Shatner was boldly going where others have gone before and referred to him as a guinea pig. Shatner, for his part, seemed more amused than wounded. The feud is real. The bitterness is real. But here's the thing. The feud that gets far less tabloid coverage, the one that was quieter and more personal, and ultimately far more devastating for Shatner, wasn't with Takei at all. So who was the co-star whose silence hurt Shatner the most? And what happened in those final weeks before it was too late to fix it? Before Kirk, the boy from Montreal who stumbled into stardom. Here's something people don't often think about when they picture William Shatner. He was born not in Hollywood, not in New York, not even in the United States. He came into the world on March 22, 1931, in Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, Montreal, a leafy, mostly English-speaking neighborhood tucked into the heart of Quebec. He was born into a conservative Jewish family, the son of Anne and Joseph Shatner, with 2 sisters, Joy and Farla. His father worked in the clothing business, the kind of steady, respectable trade that immigrant families built their Canadian dream stories around. And his family was, in many ways, a classic immigrant success story. His grandfather had already made one defining decision before William was even born. He'd changed the family name to sound more English, smoothing over the rough edges of an Eastern European surname in a country that didn't always welcome differences with open arms. Shatner's grandparents had fled from Ukraine and Lithuania back when those regions were divided between the Russian Empire and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, searching for something safer, something more stable. Young William went to Willow Street Elementary School and then West Hill High School, unremarkable in the way most childhoods are unremarkable until they're not. He found his way to the Montreal Children's Theatre, discovered that performing felt like breathing, and decided to chase it. Not instead of education, alongside it. He enrolled at McGill University and studied economics, graduating in 1952 with a Bachelor of Commerce. So yes, Captain Kirk has a commerce degree. Let that amuse you for a moment. Before he graduated, he was also working as a camp counselor at a B'nai B'rith summer camp. And it's there, in that ordinary summer job, that one of the most quietly beautiful details of his early life emerges. Among the campers was a teenage Holocaust survivor who didn't speak English. Shatner made it his personal mission to help the boy learn the language, spending time with him, patient and kind, in a way that people who later accused him of being impossible to work with might find hard to reconcile. That kind of early empathy doesn't disappear. It gets buried sometimes under decades of ego and ambition and celebrity. But it was there. His big theatrical break came in 1956 at the Stratford Shakespeare Festival in Ontario, where he was understudying Christopher Plummer in Henry V. Here's the moment. Plummer came down with kidney stones. Shatner got 3 hours' notice that he was going on. 3 hours. For a major Shakespearean lead. He went on. He performed. He didn't just survive. He apparently shone so brightly that Plummer himself, one of the greatest stage actors of his generation, later wrote that he knew, watching Shatner that night, that this young man was going to be a star. Shatner's own memory of that night is very different. He has described it as terrifying beyond description and said he would never, ever do anything like it again. That contrast, the natural star who was utterly terrified of the stage, tells you something real about William Shatner. There's always been a gap between the image he projects and the vulnerability underneath it. After Stratford, he headed for New York, and the early American career was wonderfully, gloriously strange. His first regular U.S. television role was on The Howdy Doody Show, playing a character called Ranger Bob, performing opposite puppets and a honking clown. He played Alexei, the younger brother, in the 1958 film The Brothers Karamazov, alongside Yul Brynner. He appeared in a live Christmas special as a Roman tax collector in Bethlehem. He guest-starred on Alfred Hitchcock Presents. He was building something, piece by piece, roll by roll. And then came 1966, and a ship called the Enterprise, and a captain called Kirk, and everything changed forever. But fame, as Shatner would discover in the most devastating ways imaginable, is rarely the full story. So what happened when the cameras stopped rolling and life threw things at him that no script could have prepared him for? Leonard, Noreen, and the kind of loss that doesn't leave you. Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner. Spock and Kirk. For most of their adult lives, the two men were something like brothers, complicated, competitive, deeply bonded brothers who brought out both the best and the worst in each other. The tension started early. In the original series, Shatner was at the top of the call sheet, the undisputed lead, and he protected that position aggressively, sometimes too aggressively. There was a TV guide photo shoot featuring Nimoy that became a whole incident, with Shatner reportedly using contractual leverage to block or delay it, burning half a day of filming time in the process. Gene Roddenberry's letter, the one about dividing the market on selfishness and egocentricity, it was addressed to both of them. When Spock became arguably more popular with fans than Kirk, it rattled Shatner. He has never fully admitted this, but the evidence is in the behavior, the line stealing, the camera positioning, the constant need to be the center. When you are genuinely brilliant and genuinely loved, the moment someone else in the room gets more applause than you, it can break something inside you. For Shatner, Nimoy's rising popularity was the crack in his armor. And yet, over time, the rivalry did something remarkable. It softened into real love. On convention tours in later years, the two men genuinely seemed to enjoy each other. There was warmth there, history, decades of shared insanity. Nimoy eventually pushed back against the studio over pay and credits. He demanded equal billing, demanded to be recognized as a co-lead, which the network refused. But the friendship, improbably, survived, until it didn't. In February 2015, Leonard Nimoy died of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. He was 83, and Shatner was not at his bedside. Not because he didn't want to be, but because something had gone wrong between them in the months before. Something quiet and terrible that Shatner would later describe in an Entertainment Tonight interview with visible pain. Nimoy, in his final months, had stopped returning Shatner's calls. No explanation, no fight, just silence. Shatner said he wrote him a letter, a heartfelt, vulnerable letter, telling him that he loved him. He never got a reply. To this day, he says, he doesn't know what he did wrong. He says he is still hurt by that silence, still devastated. A friendship that spanned half a century, ending not with a bang but with an unanswered phone and a letter that arrived too late. If that wasn't enough grief to carry, there was something that came even earlier. Something that left a wound so deep, Shatner eventually had to write a song just to get it out of him. In August 1999, Shatner's third wife, Noreen, a beautiful woman he described as his soulmate, was found dead in the swimming pool of their home. She was 40 years old. The initial shock sent reporters scrambling, and briefly, as it always does in these cases, suspicion hovered near the spouse. But an autopsy told a different story. Noreen had been drinking heavily that night and had taken sleeping pills. Her blood alcohol was 3 times the legal limit. The bruising and neck fractures suggested she had dived into the pool, hit her head, and lost consciousness in the water. Shatner had known about her alcoholism before they married. He said so openly. In fact, in his 2008 memoir, Up Till Now, he revealed that Leonard Nimoy, who knew Noreen, had warned him directly that she was an alcoholic, and had taken her to AA meetings himself, trying to help. Shatner married her anyway. He thought love was enough. He thought he could be the thing that changed everything for her. She went to rehab 3 times. She wasn't ready to stop. And one August night, she drowned. Shatner threw himself into supporting Friendly House, an organization that helps women recover from addiction. He made public statements about grief and loss that were unusually raw for a man of his generation. And years later, on his 2004 album Has Been, he recorded a spoken-word piece called What Have You Done?, a direct, shattering reckoning with the night he found her. He said he couldn't get through it in one take. The line that cuts deepest: "I can see you've had some tragedies and it never goes away, eh? It never goes away." He knew exactly what he was singing about. But, and this is the remarkable thing about William Shatner, he didn't disappear. He didn't implode. He did something instead that very few people would have the sheer audacity to do in the middle of grief. What on earth did he do next? From laughingstock to astronaut, the reinvention that nobody saw coming. The year is 1968. Star Trek is on the air. William Shatner is, objectively, one of the most famous men in America, and he decides, for reasons that remain partially mysterious even to him, to record an album. Not a proper album, not a polished commercial album designed to capitalize on his fame. No, he records The Transformed Man, a collection of spoken-word interpretations of pop songs. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, Mr. Tambourine Man, delivered in that particular Shatner style, breathless, dramatic, pausing at completely unexpected moments, somehow treating Bob Dylan lyrics like Shakespeare, and Shakespeare like a hostage negotiation. The reaction was not kind. People laughed. Music critics were baffled. Audiences treated it as an accidental comedy record. For years, The Transformed Man sat in the cultural imagination somewhere between an embarrassment and a punchline, the kind of thing you brought up at parties when you wanted to demonstrate just how magnificently out of touch a celebrity could be. Here's what's interesting, though. Shatner didn't crumble. He didn't spend years avoiding questions about it. He leaned into it. He acknowledged the absurdity. He understood, eventually, that his musical instincts were not exactly in line with mainstream taste, and he made peace with that in the most Shatner-like way possible, by finding better collaborators and doubling down. In 2004, he released Has Been, produced by Ben Folds, and this time, the critics came around. The album was sharp, self-aware, emotionally honest, and genuinely entertaining, a direct confrontation with everything people thought about William Shatner, including William Shatner himself. It featured What Have You Done?, the devastating Noreen tribute. It featured a song called I Can't Get Behind That, in which Shatner lists everything that annoys him about modern life with the energy of a man who has absolutely nothing left to lose. The album became one of the most surprising critical successes of his late career. Then came Seeking Major Tom in 2011, another album, this time a loose concept record about space travel, featuring covers and original material. Because, of course, a man who played a starship captain was going to make an album about space. Of course he was. But nothing prepared anyone for what Shatner did in October 2021, at the age of 90 years old. He went to actual space. Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos' commercial space company, launched Shatner on its New Shepard rocket, and in doing so, created one of the most genuinely moving moments of that entire year. Shatner became the oldest person ever to reach space. When he landed and climbed out of the capsule, he was visibly emotional, fighting tears, struggling to find words. He described what he called the overview effect, that profound, almost spiritual shift in perception that astronauts talk about when they look down at Earth from the blackness of space and understand, in their gut, how fragile and precious and alone we all are. He said he had been to the mountaintop and that he did not know what he had thought he was going to feel, but it was grief. Takei, predictably, had something to say about it. He noted online that Shatner was boldly going where others have gone before, and called him a guinea pig. Shatner, from orbit-adjacent glory, barely flinched. Then there are the horses. Oh, the horses. Shatner has been riding since he was 15 years old, and the passion never dimmed. He bought a 360-acre ranch in Kentucky called Bell Reef, where he bred horses and competed seriously in reining, a Western equestrian discipline, well into his 90s. He wrote about horses in his 2017 book, Spirit of the Horse, describing a relationship that had given him comfort, structure, and purpose for over 30 years. When he and his fourth wife, Elizabeth Anderson Martin, divorced in 2020 after 19 years together, the Kentucky ranch went to her. But Shatner kept the horse semen rights. Every collection of semen from every horse he had bred, the genetic legacy of his equestrian life, stayed with him. Not the ranch, not the acres, the semen. If that detail doesn't tell you everything you need to know about how deeply William Shatner prioritizes the things he actually loves, nothing will. And speaking of the man at 95, what does he look like today? And is he showing any signs whatsoever of slowing down? Still here, still talking, still Shatner. 95 years old. Let's just sit with that for a second. The man was born before World War II started. He has outlived most of his co-stars. He has survived grief, public ridicule, professional rivalry, 4 marriages, and a trip to the edge of the atmosphere. And he is still showing up. For the past 35 years, without missing a single one, Shatner has spent his birthday doing something that quietly demolishes the narrative of the difficult, self-absorbed star. He works. He shows up for the Hollywood Charity Horse Show, an annual event he has championed and helped build into a fundraising institution, raising millions of dollars for children's charities and veterans organizations. Not once, not a few times, 35 years in a row. In 2025, for his 95th birthday, his family arranged a trip to Las Vegas, dinner, a show, a night out together, back to Los Angeles. He described it in an interview as a family experience. No spectacle, no red carpet. Just his people, gathered around him, celebrating the improbable fact that he was still there. The year before, for his 94th, he attended the premiere of You Can Call Me Bill, a documentary about his life. He admitted, in true Shatner fashion, that he felt deeply uncomfortable watching a film about himself. He doesn't like to talk about himself. He doesn't like to watch himself. He has spent 95 years building one of the most recognizable personas on the planet, and the real man underneath it still flinches when he has to look. There's something worth sitting with in that image, the most famous captain in the universe, ill at ease in his own biography. Because that's the thing about William Shatner that all the tabloid drama, all the feuds, and the feuding, and the flying, and the horses, and the albums, all of it can obscure. He is not simply the cartoon villain that Takei describes, nor is he the flawless hero that Captain Kirk was written to be. He is something far more human and far more interesting. He is a brilliant, difficult, funny, deeply wounded, deeply generous, occasionally insufferable man who has had the very specific experience of becoming a symbol and spending the rest of his life trying to figure out who he is underneath it. He lost a wife he loved and couldn't save. He lost a best friend to silence he didn't understand. He made an album everyone laughed at, and another one everyone praised. He went to space at 90. He raised millions for charity for 35 consecutive years. He wrote a song so raw about grief that he couldn't finish recording it in a single take. He had cast members who adored him and cast members who would go to their graves angry at him. He never watched the show that made him famous. He is 95 years old. He is still here. And knowing Shatner, he's still got things to say. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the extraordinary, messy, unbelievable, absolutely human truth about William Shatner. Captain Kirk, Emmy winner, space traveler, grieving husband, feuding co-star, horse breeder, and somehow, impossibly, a man who is still standing at 95, still surprising people, still refusing to be neatly summarized. If this video lit something up in you, smash that like button and subscribe, because we are just getting started. Next time, we're diving into another Hollywood legend with secrets that the headlines barely scratch the surface of. And trust us, you are not ready for what's coming. Drop your guesses in the comments below. We'll see you in the next one. Don't go anywhere.